All right, you guys, welcome back. You're tuning into episode 6 of Nowhere to Hide. I'm your host, Alexis, and I am joined here by my second ever guest, Josh Diaz. In this episode, we're just going to be continuing my mental disconnect series that I've mentioned previously, where I'm just going to be interviewing first gens, and he is a first generation Cuban American. And we're just going to bring up the 3 whys that I've mentioned in episode 3 that pretty much contribute to that mental disconnect that first gens may have with their parents. But before we get into that, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you feeling about the podcast in this very moment?
It's a little nerve-wracking, but, I feel like I'll get used to it the more we talk, for sure.
Why would you say it's nerve-wracking to you in this moment?
Probably because I've never been on a podcast before. I'm not used to even being in front of a camera that much, so always used to just watching it on TV or on your phone,
Yeah. It is a lot, and y'all saw my journey already with starting my very first episode to now, even though it hasn't been much, but it is a lot to get used to, just not only speaking in front of a camera, but being vulnerable in front of a camera as well. It's a lot. But I applaud you for being here, seriously, because we're going to get into it. It's not going to be easy, but hopefully you guys benefit. But I'd also like to mention, too, and highlight that it is Hispanic Heritage Month. So shout out to all the Hispanics out there listening, watching, possibly supporting. This episode is dedicated to y'all. But let's begin the conversation by asking you, do you feel like as a first generation Cuban American, do you have some sort of mental disconnect with your parents?
I would say more with my dad than I do my mom. But
Okay. And why would you say that, just right off the bat?
it's a tough question to answer already. I guess we just never really saw eye to eye like that.
When it came to emotion, when it came to just how things should be in life, where you should go in life, all of the above?
I'd say pretty much anything.
Anything?
Yeah, the one thing we got along with was like movies and TV shows, stuff like that. That was the one thing that we could get along with.
But everything else was pretty much kind of tough.
Rocky, yeah.
All right. Well, going back to the 3 whys that I mentioned previously, let's say you guys didn't listen to episode 3. The 3 whys are basically the contributing factors, like I said before, to the mental disconnect that we may have with our parents. I'm going to just remind you guys of the 3 whys. First one being differing in environmental and societal upbringing. Second one is pressures of being successful. And the third one is the parents also sharing in that mental disconnect with their parents as well. So I guess as a starting point for you, just how did your upbringing, would you say, differ from your parents' upbringing?
Mine was definitely way easier than theirs. My mom lost both her parents before the age of 16, unfortunately, so I never got to meet my grandparents on her side. And my dad just had a very rough upbringing as well. He dealt with abuse. His father was wrongfully convicted, put in prison for 26 years when he was just a teenager. Mm-hmm. And, my grandmother, my father's mom, really tried a lot. She had to do a lot to, put them through school, stuff like that.
And your father grew up in Cuba?
He was born in Cuba, and then when he was a baby, my grandparents moved him to New Jersey, and then that's where my uncle was born, and I'm pretty sure after that they moved down to Miami, and that's where my aunt was born, and that's where my mom was born, and that's where I was born too.
Okay. And you weren't always in Miami, were you? Because obviously I met you in South Carolina. So would you say that you moving from Miami to South Carolina at such a young age probably played a factor in your disconnect as well? Because going from an environment where you were surrounded by a lot of Hispanic people to moving to South Carolina where the schools there, obviously some may be diverse, but obviously it's a big change from majorly being Hispanic to not.
We moved over here when I was in the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. So basically in the middle of elementary is when we ended up moving over here. So I just feel like I didn't really get to experience, I guess, school, public school or private school, whatever it is. Because in Miami, I was in private school. And when we moved to Spartanburg, it's more like the upstate of South Carolina.
And you were in Duncan, South Carolina.
Right, like Lyman, Duncan, if anybody knows where that is. But yeah, it was definitely a big change.
Big change. What would you say some of the stuff you experienced, like, or let me rephrase that. Like, what were some of the stuff you experienced in the public school in Duncan, South Carolina, Lyman, South Carolina, compared to Miami schools? Even though, yes, when you were in the Miami schools, you were littler. So there's different things that you go through. That damn bubble. Sorry, y'all, because I film on my iPhone and that thumbs up loves to come up. Ignore, please. But what would you say, again, are like stuff that you experienced in Duncan compared to Miami that was a struggle?
Well, for starters, I went to DRL, if y'all know, Burns High School. That's where I graduated. And I feel like it was more of a struggle in elementary and middle school, and I didn't really have any friends. But in middle school, I thankfully met this guy named Joey. Shout out Joey. But he definitely helped me get through. Coincidentally, he also lived in our neighborhood, so it was just, very convenient that my buddy that I went to school with also lived in my neighborhood. We used to ride golf carts, all type of stuff. So he made it easier. But getting back to your question about some of the experiences, there was definitely a little racism here and there. People just bullying you because they didn't know who you were, where you were from, instead of just talking to you, asking you questions, about where you're from. They'd rather just make fun of you and stuff, which that'll rub off on you. So that unfortunately made me do some acts that I'm not proud of as well in middle school. But I feel like once I met Joey, it's funny because his parents always thought that we were a bad influence on each other, but I feel like we were good influences on each other because if we saw each other doing something stupid, we're those type of friends. Like, we're going to tell each other, don't do that. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I remember it's funny, he's saying that with the whole fitting in. I just remember you telling me some stories when you first moved to South Carolina and your mom would still be dressing you in those like Hawaiian Miami shirts and you'd get made fun of. It's just like the simple things as far as like what you wear and what that can do. Like, it'll get you bullied for that. Not funny, but I thought it was funny.
For sure. And, it's also funny that you say that because it's ironic how life works out. Because now, I still wear stuff like this and I would wear it to work and people would ask me,
to be made fun of for that.
People would even tell me at work, like, hey, you should be in Miami. Like, you shouldn't be in here right now. And I'm like, okay, like, it just brings me back to some of the stuff people used to say in school. But now it's a different feeling. Now it's like, I don't care what you say. I'm still going to wear what I want to wear. I'm going to, represent my culture if I want to. And if you make fun of me, I don't really care anymore. So.
And how would you say your sense of belongingness was during that time? Not even during that time, but just throughout your time in South Carolina? Because I know me and you have talked about this because I relate to not having that sense of belongingness growing up, being in school, because, I didn't feel like I fit in with the Black people enough. I didn't know like so much about their culture, but at the same time, I didn't really feel like I fit in with my African crowd either because I didn't, I lost the language and I wasn't really in touch with my African side during that point in my life. It was, very hard, just feeling like you're in your own little box and no matter how hard you try, you don't fit in anywhere. So would you say you relate to that, and in what way?
I definitely relate to that. I feel like when I was around, because we would go back to Miami on vacation, to visit the family and stuff. And whenever I was around my family, I wasn't Hispanic enough for them because I started getting used to being around here or around Spartanburg. And whenever I was here, I wasn't white enough, quote unquote, for the people in Spartanburg or Duncan. So it definitely was hard. I tried to find Hispanic friends here and there, but I felt like in South Carolina also the Cubans, which that's what I am, are very few and far between. There's definitely way more Cubans here in Charlotte, but yeah, it's It's tough over there.
And also the fact too, I just remembered how people don't even be thinking you're Hispanic half the time. So that also probably plays into your sense of belongingness. Because even nowadays, people be thinking like you're like maybe okay, they'll think you're Hispanic, but you usually just get Middle Eastern, if anything, especially just in the Charlotte area where we're at. Because a lot of Middle Eastern people, I feel like, do have your look in a certain way to where people will mistake you. But I know that can be a lot too. Like, just because of that history of you not having that sense of belongingness.
I definitely can see it. It's just the assumptions. You know, like you and me, we're not walking up to people being like, you're Irish or you're Italian, you know. So
people love to do that.
It's just, it's funny. It definitely is funny when people come up to you and just assume what you are or who you are, where you come from.
Exactly. I guess we can move on to the second point, which is pressures of being successful. How would you say the pressures of being successful that your family plus your parents put on you have weighed on you in your life? Like, would you say it's been more of your parents that have played a hand in pressuring you and being successful? Or would you say it's like your family as a whole?
I would say just my family as a whole, you know, aside from my mom. Because my mom has just always been there, supportive. And then, I don't know, my dad's side of the family, they have been supportive of me throughout my whole life. It's just the pressures that,
you know, if you haven't gotten something done at this certain point,
I feel like sometimes they don't realize are there. It's not that they do it on purpose, but the pressures, like the foundations of that are laid from when you're, you know, at a very young age.
So would you say that you have anyone in particular in your family who really like led you to feeling those pressures? Because I know earlier you were saying like with the disconnect in general, it's more your dad than your mom. And then obviously we learned too that you don't really have much on your mom's side. It's just your mom's sister and her son. So I guess, yeah, going from that. Are there people in particular, reasonings?
Well, for starters, I haven't spoken to my dad for quite some time. It's been a few years.
Right. Are you wanting to say, like, you don't have to go into detail, but are you wanting to say why?
I feel like those pressures you're referring to is one of the reasons for sure. It gets to a point to where you feel like you need your space, no matter who it is. If it's family, if it's someone you love, I feel like people always just need their time when they're overwhelmed or when it's just been too much for them. So it got to be too much a couple years ago for me. I mean, you know about that stuff.
Right.
And I'm working to hopefully one day be able to talk to him again.
And would you say your family is in support of you taking that time for yourself? Do you feel like there's a disconnect in that, or do you feel like they understand where you're coming from when it comes to not speaking to your father?
I think they want to understand. They want to level with me, stuff like that. But to them, it's mostly about the fact that that's just my father, and it's about respect, and, you know, that's blood. And you should always just, I guess, talk to people in your family, no matter what the problem is. But sometimes it just is too big of an issue for it to be that simple. Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm sorry. I feel like that's just a thing, like, that I've recognized over the years, not even in just Hispanic culture, but or not even culture, just families in general having that whole, like, I'm trying to think of a way to form my words with this, but just having that idea of being blood and how, like, because we're blood, that you owe it to me to do this or you owe it to me to do that. When in reality, if you're making, and I'm not speaking to anyone specifically, but just in general, like, if you as a family member are putting pressures on people or making someone feel uncomfortable to the point to where, you know, maybe they do need their space or maybe they do need to make a decision for themselves to take a step back, who are we to bring up blood as a reasoning to not put yourself over others? You get what I'm saying when I say that? Just, you know, you saying that with your family, and I've seen it a little bit in my family. Like, I'm just talking with friends about their family life. I feel like there's always, a family member or someone in the family where, maybe they're upsetting someone else, but everyone will always bring it back to, but that's your family, that's your blood, you need to. And I'm a big person on that, guys. Like, talking about this mental disconnect stuff, there are issues in our families that need to be resolved. And I really push for trying to resolve that, because I feel like not resolving things just creates a weight on your life that it's not worth keeping in your life. Try and fix it if you can. But at the same time, if that family member is still continuously, no matter how hard you try, it's still weighing on your life so negatively, things are not, getting fixed. Why stay? Why still continue to put yourself around that family member, that person, if it's just going to keep negatively affecting you?
I do want to say also, I agree with everything you're saying, but I do want to say, in respect to people who don't have a mom or dad, they've had one of their parents pass away, or they just had parents leave on them. I definitely understand that, and I struggle right now.
No, but I feel like I get what you're saying too, and even the point that you were just making, because you're saying how you understand when people have lost their family members and stuff, and how even though you're making this conscious decision to not speak to your dad, other people don't even have a dad that they can make a conscious
because
decision to not.
I feel like some people might see it as a slap in the face because they lost their loved one, and I have the chance to speak to my father, but I'm choosing not to. But I just want to say I definitely feel for that, and I respect that to the fullest. It's just that I had to make this decision for myself, for our relationship.
Right.
For the relationship with my mom. Like, there are certain things that you go through in life that can affect your relationship with other people. And when it gets to the point to where it's starting to affect your mental health and your relationship with the people you truly care about, who are there 24/7 for you, that is when it gets to the point to where you just need your space.
I agree. Because even what I was going to say before, when you were like losing your thought, what came to mind was you telling me this instance that you had at work where you were confiding in someone, maybe one of your coworkers, I forgot who, just about the relationship you had with your dad, your decision not to speak to him. And what this person was doing was basically making you feel bad, guilting you, being like, well, and I mean, we all know that, like, that is your dad. But the keeping on, that is your dad, though. Like, I feel like you need to, and they brought up the whole, like, some people don't even have their father to say anything to, like, you should still talk to him or this and that, not even knowing the circumstances on why you had to make the decision. So even though I still agree with what you said, like, I like that you're mindful to that, but at the same time, just because there are others who have lost their loved ones, like, you shouldn't take that and make yourself feel any less for the decision that you chose to make. I'm sorry, guys. I feel like sometimes my English is weird, but I hope you guys understood what I meant by that. Because, like, my best friend, she's lost her mom at a young age, but I feel like just because she lost her mom and she doesn't get to see her mother again, and I'm not saying she would even do this, but that doesn't give her the right, when she sees the decision you've made, to be like, well, I'll never get the chance to see someone I love again, so who are you to not? No one knows that. No one knows the reasoning, so no one should have the right to say that. But, yeah.
I feel like I get that, like 90% of the time when I tell someone the story of my dad and what happened.
And that's why I brought it up, because you've told me multiple times that people will guilt you in that way, and I'll have to be the one to keep validating you on your decision that it is okay, as long as this is what you're needing to get through what you're needing to get through, then do it. Like, if this is what will help you be better by just cutting out this person for a short time. Because in the grand scheme of things, even though it has been years, it's still such a short time.
It is.
Compared to just our life. You're not going to not talk to him forever. I know you don't want to. But still, people need to just respect your decision, respect your need for space. Like, I feel like that's just something families need to understand, period. At least specifically when it comes to a family member not talking to a certain family member. I feel like that's something that all families, they'll say one thing, but once it happens in your family, it's really just, oh, make up. When it's like, it's not that simple.
I get trying to get people back together, especially if you don't know what happened or the background of it. But just the judgment,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people shouldn't judge, especially when they don't know what happened or the situation exactly. So
Yeah.
that's all I'm trying to say. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for sharing all that. Talked about a lot. I feel like we went off on a tangent, but I guess going back to the topic of just pressures of being successful, do you have anything more to say on that and just how your family has put that pressure on you? Or do you feel like because of the pressure your family has put on you, do you unknowingly put that pressure on yourself now? Like, how would you say you deal with that pressure of being successful now?
That was like 3 questions in one.
All right, we'll pick one to answer.
Pick one. I definitely feel like I put that on myself now, which is, it ends up being a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, your family only wants what's best for you. That's what they always tell you. But the difference is what it seems like, and sometimes it just seems like it's more for them. Like,
Right.
if you do what they want you to do, then it'll make them happy. But what about us? Like, that's why I wrote down on there, do they even care?
Yeah.
Because let's say 10, 15 years from now, you and I are married and God willing, we have kids, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But are we happy with that decision is the real question.
Like you're saying,
Our whole
did
family
we do that
is
for
happy.
ourselves or did we do that for the family?
Exactly. Pretty much. Like, is that what is going to make us the most happy, me the most happy, you the most happy individually, not just us as a unit?
And that even kind of plays into my last episode, fear of disappointment disorder. Shout out to that, because that fear of disappointment, that I feel like translates to in that pressure of being successful, pressure of doing what they want. And when you ride on that fear of disappointment and you go about life with that, I feel like you do find yourself getting into things, accomplishing things that are more for the sake of your family, the sake of pleasing your family than you and what you really were wanting to do.
Exactly.
Again, goes back to this podcast always for me. Like, if I really let that fear of disappointment take me over, I literally would not be doing this right now. I would just still stay on track on the psychology career path, which I still am getting into. Just got my new big girl job. You're looking at a new behavioral technician as of September 30th. Yeah, I lied in the last episode. I ended up trying to find jobs anyway. But that's besides the point. Still, I feel like if we let that control us, we're not going to aspire to do things and accomplish things for ourselves. I agree with that.
Very true.
But I guess we can go to the other point, the other why, last why of the 3 whys, which is that mental disconnect with our parents. And if our parents also suffered in having that mental disconnect with theirs, and if that may have fallen onto you, whatever, but do you feel like your parents also, even though you didn't really get to know your mom's parents that well, but maybe
I didn't get to know them at all.
Or not at all. But do you, from what they've told you, from what your mom's told you, or maybe your dad, do you feel like they also had that mental disconnect with their parents?
Well, I don't hear a lot of stories about my mom's parents, because it was a very hard time for her, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But as far as my dad's parents, he definitely had a disconnect with them because...
Yeah. Like, let's actually backtrack to the incarceration, too, because that already in itself is a mental disconnect. Like, being away from your parent for 26 years, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Like, already that's just not having a connection at all because you lose all that time.
Even I had to go and visit my grandfather in prison, as a kid. So that was tough, too.
Exactly. How do you feel like, how did you see that affecting your dad personally?
Well, they always shielded me from it. I was just a very gullible child.
Didn't they tell
told
you
me
that
he was a doctor, and that's why he would always wear scrubs and stuff. So he would always have like these blue, the uniform that they make him put on and stuff. But it took a toll on my dad for sure. Not having his dad there. His mom ended up marrying someone else, Noel, a long time after he was incarcerated. And my grandfather's name is Luis, by the way. But yeah, it took a big toll on my dad for sure, because we kept having to go hours from Miami to visit my grandfather. And for years, they were trying to get him out because he was innocent the whole time. And he was just wrongfully convicted. But yeah.
How do you feel like that affected him emotionally, though, towards you? I guess him having his father absent from him at a young age, like, have you seen things on how that's probably had a trickle effect onto y'all's relationship?
Well,
from your opinion.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, maybe you're right, because I can imagine how not having that father figure for so long, which I feel like it didn't affect my uncle, my dad's brother, that much.
Is that his younger or older brother?
Oh, sorry. But yeah, that's his younger brother.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it didn't affect him that much. It probably did affect him mentally, but outwardly, it didn't really affect him that much. But my dad, I feel like it definitely took a bigger toll on him, because you could see, like, he was even, when we lived in South Carolina, when my grandfather was finally out, he was even, like, calling his mom almost every day. So that just shows that he didn't really have that relationship with his dad, even when he got out of prison. So.
Yeah, and I remember that too. But since we've already discussed the 3 whys at this point and just how it contributes to your life, all I have left to ask is, do you care to minimize that disconnect that you have with your parents? And if so, how do you think you'd go about that?
I definitely care to minimize it with my parents and my family, in general. I would like to be that leader in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, even though I'm not there right now, eventually I'd like to be that person who can just tell, no matter who it is, no matter what family member, what's what. Like, if I just don't see something that's adding up.
And when you say what's what do you mean by that?
I feel like whenever, for example, if your mom or dad or your uncle or aunt sees you doing something that they don't think is necessarily, or they hear from someone else even, that you were doing something uncharacteristic of you, or something that could get you hurt, you know what I mean? Or something that could get you in trouble.
Yeah.
If they hear that, they're probably going to go and have a talk with you about that. But I feel like as the kids, as the next generation, sometimes it doesn't feel like we're allowed to do that, really. We can't, hold them accountable and be like, hey, I heard this from such and such, or hey, I saw you doing this. And
that reminds me of something my dad used to tell me growing up, that not even just me, but my siblings in general, that we are not equals. And I understand that definitely from his point of view, because I definitely, as a child, I definitely challenged my parents, specifically my dad, a lot with my mouth and the certain things I may do or say. But he would always establish that, like, we are not equals. Like, you are not supposed to be speaking to me like you are also an adult as well. Mm. And I do understand that, like, ideology to a certain degree. But obviously, I'm 23 right now. You're even 27, going on 28. And the fact that I, and even you, we still both feel the same when it comes to the adults in our family. And even though, we're in our 20s and we have been through a good bit, we're still not able to shake that, we're just not able to shake that whole, we're not equals.
I would just call it respect.
Yeah, it is a respect.
I guess too much respect sometimes,
Where I feel like, adults, they don't know when they need to, I don't know how to say it, but just, obviously we have respect for our parents. We have respect for our aunts and uncles. And it'll always, at least for me personally, it'll always remain that way. But there comes a point in time where they need to be able to relinquish some of that respect and be able to come to terms with, okay, even though I still demand my respect as an adult, I can recognize too that you are also becoming an adult, or you're also able to make certain decisions, have certain opinions on things, and the fact that they're able to respect that as well. But what happens most of the time is they aren't able to. They are still under the mindset, you are not my equal. I'm older than you. I'm always your aunt. I'm always your dad. I'm always your mother. But it's like, when am I going to get to that age or a point in my life where I am viewed as the equal with that respect still in play? But I am also an equal in a sense of now I am an adult and I have all these responsibilities to where it's not as simple as, I'm just a kid not knowing what to do anymore.
I feel like that all goes back to the pressures of success as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not successful, then that means, we're not as wise. We haven't, I guess, been through as much as they have. So who are we to even question them on anything?
Exactly. Definitely it comes with the whole, we haven't been through a lot. And that is still the case. Being the ages that we are, we still have so much to go through. But I feel like, it shouldn't have to do with our age when it comes to, knowing what from what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They raised us to know what from what. So whenever we try to tell them something that we may sense is off, it's almost like they treat us like they didn't raise us like that. Like we don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I see where you're coming from.
It's a pride and respect thing at the same time.
And going back to you saying how you're trying to be that leader for your family and minimizing the disconnect, do you also realize that you doing this podcast in itself is a way of minimizing the disconnect, or at least starting to? Because again, just me personally having this podcast and putting out these episodes, touching on the certain topics and emotions, whatever, that's just my way. I feel like this in itself has already been starting those conversations in my family and just minimizing that emotional disconnect because, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all hearing how I feel in these podcasts. And I know for a long time we didn't have that sort of safe space in our family. Not even safe space, let me not put it like that, but we didn't really have that sort of conversation in our family to where we could be that vulnerable or could be that open of our feelings and views because of that respect.
Exactly.
Because of, if I oversay too much, now I'm becoming disrespectful towards my family and their beliefs. So that ultimately creates not saying much. But I feel like this podcast is able to give me that platform to speak on these certain issues and to hopefully just start those conversations in my family. And I want that for my guests, for you as well, where if I have a guest come on here, they're able to be vulnerable, speak their truth, and hopefully if their family isn't the type of family to have those emotional conversations, this and them being a part of this can be that start to that. So
I just want to say too, I'm proud of you for even having this podcast, doing this, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't even be able to sit here, be vulnerable with you and all these people watching. So thank you too.
Of course. And even it didn't even take me doing this podcast for you to be vulnerable too, but still being vulnerable on camera is a whole different type of vulnerable than just being vulnerable
Men
in
don't
general.
cry, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, whatever.
Men do not cry.
Just wait till y'all see this thumbnail. Oh wait, hold on. We need to do thumbnail.
Or you could have just used the other one. Here, just circle back.
Yeah, whatever. We'll do a thumbnail later. But it has been a pleasure once again. I thank you guys so much for those who do tune in and keep up with me.
One last thing I want to say. Just shout out Janine, shout out Steven. I love you guys, my whole family. Even though I've mentioned my family in this podcast, I love my entire family. Love you, Mom, everyone. And again, I'm really proud of you, babe, for doing this. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. And yes, shout out to the family, Janine and Steven. Hope you guys are well. But it's been a pleasure. And tune in next time. See you guys soon.
Yo te voy a olvidar antes que te feliz ya pa' que yo te voy a olvidar. Yo te voy a olvidar,